still hurts, man. It's almost like rubbing a sore, and it start bleeding again as soon as you start rubbing on it. I still feel like, like I taught them that family was important.
Authorities say an autopsy is inconclusive, but have ruled out foul play in the death of recording artist Sean Levert. Levert was a third of the 1980s R&B trio Levert and the son of the lead singer of the O'Jays, Eddie Levert.
Why do you do music if you're not trying to tell somebody something, if you're not trying to educate? And remember this.
Eddie Levert is once a voice that asked the world to come together, not through politics, not through power, but through music. A voice that invited people from every corner of the world to climb aboard a train of love and unity and ride it together. For millions, that voice represented hope. It carried warmth, soul, and an emotional depth that few singers could ever match. But behind the music that brought people together, there was a life filled with unimaginable heartbreak. Because while audiences were dancing, singing, and celebrating his songs, Eddie Levert was quietly facing storms that no father should ever have to endure. Today, at 83 years old, the life of Eddie Levert stands as both a triumph of musical greatness and a story of devastating loss. For more than 6 decades, Eddie Levert has been one of the most powerful voices in American soul music. As the founding member and emotional heartbeat of the legendary group, the O'Jays, his voice helped shape the sound of an entire generation. When Eddie sang, people didn't just hear the music, they felt it. His voice carried raw emotion, strength, vulnerability, and passion all at once. His songs became part of people's lives. They played at weddings, celebrations, late-night drives, heartbreaks, and quiet moments when music was the only thing that seemed to understand. But behind the platinum records, the standing ovations, and the legendary career lies a personal story so painful that it almost feels impossible to comprehend. A father who would eventually stand beside the graves of 3 of his own children. A man who brought joy to millions while quietly carrying a weight that few could survive. To understand the depth of Eddie Levert's story, we have to go back to the very beginning. Awards. Before the fame, before the world knew his voice, Eddie Levert was born on June 16, 1942, in Bessemer, Alabama. It was a time when the United States was still deeply divided by segregation, and opportunities for black families in the South were extremely limited. Life was difficult. Dreams often felt distant, but like many families searching for a better future, the Leverts eventually joined the wave of migration that saw millions of African American families move north in search of opportunity. The family relocated to Canton, Ohio, where Eddie would spend much of his childhood. It was in Canton where something remarkable began to unfold. And it all started in church. Like many legendary soul singers before him, Eddie's first stage wasn't a concert hall or recording studio. It was the pulpit of a church. As a young boy standing before the congregation, Eddie began to discover something special about his voice. When he sang, people paid attention. The room changed. Heads lifted, eyes closed, hands raised. His voice had the ability to move people emotionally. Even at a young age, there was something powerful about it. Church became more than a place of worship. It became Eddie's training ground, his classroom, his stage, and the place where his musical journey truly began. By the time he reached high school, Eddie knew that music was more than just a passion. It was his destiny. In 1958, Eddie and several classmates from McKinley High School formed a vocal group. They were just teenagers. They had no money, no industry connections, no guarantees, but they had talent, and they had determination. The group originally performed under the name The Triumphs, singing wherever they could find an audience. Local clubs, school events, small venues around Canton. The road to success was far from easy. For years, the group struggled to break into the music industry. They signed with small record labels that never quite delivered the breakthrough they hoped for. There were moments when success seemed close, only to slip away. But Eddie refused to give up. And eventually, persistence paid off. Everything changed when the group connected with legendary producers Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff. This partnership would help create what would later become known as the Philadelphia Soul Sound. It was a unique style of music that blended rich orchestration with powerful lyrics that often reflected the social realities of the time. Smooth strings, deep bass lines, and voices filled with emotion. When the group, now known as the OJs, released the song Backstabbers in 1972, it immediately captured attention. The song became a major hit and helped establish the group as one of the leading acts in soul music. But the next song would change everything. Love Train. Released in 1973, the song quickly climbed to the top of the charts and became an international anthem. Its message was simple but powerful. People from every country, every culture, and every background should come together as one. At a time when America was deeply divided by war, civil rights struggles, and social tension, the message resonated with millions, and the voice delivering that message belonged to Eddie Levert. For Eddie, the success meant far more than fame. It meant survival. The boy who once sang in church in Canton, Ohio, had now become a global symbol of unity. And the success didn't stop there. Followed. Songs like For the Love of Money, I Love Music, and Used to Be My Girl became classics that defined the golden era of soul music. The OJs toured across the world. Their concerts filled arenas. Their albums sold millions of copies. Their influence on R&B and soul music became undeniable. By the early 2000s, their legacy had been firmly established. In 2005, the OJs were officially inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, one of the highest honors in music. It was recognition of a career that had shaped the sound of American soul for more than 4 decades. From the outside looking in, Eddie Levert seemed to be living a dream life. Fame, respect, a legendary career, financial success. But life doesn't always follow the rhythm of music. Even during the group's most successful years, tragedy had already begun to creep into Eddie's story. In 1977, original OJ's member William Powell passed away from cancer at just 35 years old. The loss shocked the group and reminded them that even the brightest careers could not escape life's harsh realities. Eddie continued performing. The music continued, but the first shadow had already appeared. Still, the greatest joy in Eddie's life wasn't his career. It was his family. He was a father, and his children grew up surrounded by music. Among them were his sons Gerald Levert and Sean Levert, who spent much of their childhood watching rehearsals, visiting studios, and traveling backstage during tours. Music surrounded them from the very beginning. It was only natural that they would eventually follow in their father's footsteps. In the 1980s, Gerald and Sean formed an R&B group called Levert, along with their friend Mark Gordon. The group quickly found success. But what impressed Eddie the most was that his sons weren't simply relying on his fame. They were talented in their own right. Their music connected with audiences. Their voices carried the same emotional depth that had made their father famous. For Eddie, nothing could have felt more rewarding than seeing his children succeed. And in 1992, he experienced one of the most special moments of his life. He recorded a duet with his son Gerald, titled Baby Hold On to Me. The song became a #1 hit on the R&B charts. But for Eddie, it meant far more than commercial success. It was a moment where father and son stood side by side. 2 generations, 2 voices, 1 musical legacy. By the early 2000s, Eddie Levert appeared to have everything a man could dream of. A Hall of Fame career, a respected name in music history, a thriving family legacy. But sometimes, life's most devastating moments arrive when everything seems perfect. And in November 2006, Eddie Levert's world changed forever. Gerald Levert, his son, his musical partner, and one of the most respected voices in R&B, was found unresponsive in his home. He was just 40 years old. The cause of death was later ruled an accidental overdose, caused by a dangerous combination of prescription medications. The news sent shockwaves throughout the music industry. Fans were stunned. Artists mourned the loss of a powerful voice taken far too soon. But no one felt the pain more deeply than Eddie Levert. Just weeks earlier, father and son had performed together overseas. Now Eddie found himself standing beside the casket of his own child. The man who had spent his entire life singing about love and life now had to face the unimaginable reality of burying his son. And yet, in one of the most heartbreaking moments of his life, Eddie did something extraordinary. At Gerald's funeral, he stood before the mourners, and he sang. Because sometimes, when words are no longer enough, music becomes the only language left. But what no one knew at that moment was that Eddie Levert's heartbreak was far from over, and the tragedy that followed would change his life forever. Losing a child is a pain no parent is ever truly prepared for. It is a kind of grief that changes a person forever. For Eddie Levert, the loss of his son Gerald in 2006 felt like the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Gerald had not only been his son, he had been his musical partner, his collaborator, and a piece of the legacy Eddie had spent his entire life building. They had shared stages. They had shared microphones. They had shared the same passion for music. Now, Eddie was left with silence where his son's voice once lived. The Levert family tried to process the unimaginable loss. Fans across the world mourned Gerald's passing, remembering him as one of the most powerful voices in R&B. But inside the family home, grief was far more personal. Empty chairs at dinner, memories that suddenly carried unbearable weight, and a father trying to understand why his child had been taken so soon. But just as the family was struggling to heal, another devastating tragedy was waiting just around the corner. In March of 2008, less than 2 years after Gerald's death, another nightmare struck the Levert family. Eddie's other son, Sean Levert, suddenly passed away at the age of 39. The circumstances surrounding Sean's death were deeply disturbing. At the time, Sean had been serving a short sentence in a Cleveland jail related to unpaid child support. While in custody, Sean reportedly became extremely ill. According to reports, he repeatedly asked for medical help, complaining that he was experiencing severe symptoms and needed assistance. But help did not arrive in time. Sean collapsed in his jail cell and later died. The news shocked the public and devastated the Levert family once again. Within just 2 years, Eddie Levert had now lost 2 of his sons, 2 young men, 2 talented artists, 2 lives gone far too soon. For any parent, burying one child is an unimaginable nightmare. But burying 2, that kind of loss leaves scars that never truly heal. Eddie would later speak openly about the emotional toll these tragedies took on him. The pain was overwhelming. There were days when the grief felt impossible to carry. But somehow, Eddie kept moving forward, and once again, music became his refuge. In the years following his sons' deaths, Eddie turned to songwriting as a way to process his emotions. One of the most powerful expressions of that grief came through his solo album, Did I Make You Go Ooh? The album included songs dedicated to his sons, filled with heartbreak, reflection, and love. Through music, Eddie tried to make sense of the unimaginable. because sometimes pain becomes too heavy for ordinary words. But even after losing 2 sons, life would test Eddie's strength once again. In 2017, another devastating blow struck the Levert family. Eddie's daughter, Ryan Levert, passed away after battling lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease that can attack the body's organs and tissues. Ryan had lived with the illness for years, fighting a quiet battle away from the spotlight. But despite her strength and determination, the disease eventually claimed her life. For Eddie, it was yet another heartbreaking loss. 3 children, 3 funerals. No parent ever expects to stand beside the graves of their own children, let alone 3 of them. The weight of that grief is almost impossible to imagine. Yet through it all, Eddie Levert has continued to stand. Friends, fans, and fellow musicians often speak about the incredible resilience he has shown in the face of so much loss. Music, once again, became the thing that kept him moving forward. Because for Eddie Levert, music has never just been a career. It has been a lifeline, a way to express emotions that words cannot fully capture, a way to honor the memories of the people he has loved and lost. Even in his later years, Eddie has continued performing and recording music, keeping the legacy of soul alive for new generations. Every time he steps onto a stage, there is something deeper behind the performance. Every lyric carries history, every note carries memory, and every performance carries the spirit of the family he has lost. Fans who attend his shows today often say they can feel the emotion in his voice more strongly than ever. It is the voice of a man who has experienced both extraordinary success and unimaginable heartbreak. A man who has given the world songs about love and unity, even while carrying his own private grief. But perhaps the most remarkable part of Eddie Levert's story is not just the tragedy. It is the resilience. Despite the losses, despite the heartbreak, despite the unimaginable pain, he kept going, he kept singing, he kept sharing his gift with the world, because music was never just something Eddie Levert did. It was who he was, and in many ways, it became the bridge between his past and his present. The songs he sings today carry the echoes of his sons' voices. They carry the memories of his daughter. They carry the spirit of a family that helped shape his life. At 83 years old, Eddie Levert stands as more than just a legendary singer. He stands as a symbol of endurance, a reminder that even the strongest voices can carry deep pain, but also a reminder that resilience can rise even from the darkest moments. For millions of fans around the world, Eddie Levert will always be remembered as the man whose voice helped bring people together, the man who invited the world to board the love train. But behind that legendary voice is a father who has faced more heartbreak than most people could ever imagine. And yet, somehow, he is still standing, still singing, still carrying the music forward. Because sometimes the most powerful voices are not the ones that have never experienced pain. They are the ones that continue to sing, even after the heartbreak.